Right, let's get our pants off. What are we talking about?
Um, la last week we skipped over, but I thought it was important. Terrence Crawford retired, and I think it just fits because when we talk about skill and we talk about attunement, we talk about all those things. I think there was a period of time where Crawford exhibited all of that so beautifully, maybe better than anyone in this generation.
I'm at disadvantage here because I didn't follow too much, other than a couple of highlights and big fights. I didn't follow them too much. I saw the
You should
results.
go,
I saw the scoreboard.
yeah, you should go back and watch a couple things. Just I think you'll like just what you see because I think we both appreciate whatever the beauty of striking, the because it is brutal, but it is also beautiful. And so just take a look at that. But I'd love to talk about what you see. Because last week we spoke a little about skill and Terrence Crawford at 37 years old, he just retired at 37, even though he beat Canelo, had reached that stage of his career where he was on a downswing. It's impossible not to be on a downswing. But he was able to make up for whatever physical losses he had with just his eyes, his attunement, whatever you want to call it. And I'd love you to watch his fight. Watch his fight versus Canelo, another guy who also is over the hill, but bigger and dangerous. And I think the way he handles him is just amazing. And then he retired because there's no one left to fight.
Got to be honest, I'm at another disadvantage because I don't buy the pay-per-views for boxing, generally speaking. I also don't typically steal, so I don't see I haven't been able to see them. If you can find a way to maybe give me a link, or maybe they're released now. Oh, I do have I have a question about that. So, we're talking about skill being fluid and whatnot. How do you think? Do you think we're going to see the ceiling on skill, or skill kind of through this generation of kids not doing as much sport, not as much participation, and we're all getting a bit more conscious about the training environments and whatnot, and the amount of sparring and blah blah blah, and the amount of times we take fights? Do you think we'll see s- skill diminish relatively to different generations?
I assume that when we talk about this, we're talking about sort of the bell curve average, right?
Sure.
Because
I'm
I
talking
think
about
well,
I'm talking about this is a last couple of generations. There's really, I know there's kids out there that are just doing sport every day and working on their craft, but the countless hours of movement and development have been displaced by gadgets and devices. I think that has to play a part in the skill ceiling in this next generation. But I don't know. What's your thoughts?
um, maybe what it does is reduce sort of the pool that we get to choose from, right? And so the bigger the pool we have, the more chance we have of getting someone who's special. And so there maybe we may reduce the number of kids we are selecting from, if you will. Um, but I don't think that the highest performers' skill levels will be diminished compared to the previous generation. I think there are. Have you ever read like the books that predict sort of what the ceiling on sort of certain achievements is? Like, what is the fastest 100-meter dash that a human being can run? Right there is probably a ceiling on that because we can only get as long as we're human, we can only produce so much force, right? As long as we're certain heights and weights and things. So I don't think there's a ceiling as far as individuals. I think, but maybe more to your point is the way kids are being coached now, maybe limiting some of the things that they would be creating. So I'll give you an example. Do you skateboard at all? You snowboard, any of those things?
No, no. Well, I've tried,
I've tried also,
so
and,
no.
and right, okay. And at my age, I won't go near any of those things anymore. But turn on the X Games, and every year there is some kid, even the baseline of what those kids can do is further than 10 years ago. And if you look at it, it's because those sports prize creativity. And I wonder if maybe the skill ceiling you're thinking of has less to do with the ability of the kids to grow and be skillful and more the coaching methodologies being used now, putting a cap on creativity and freedom and exploration. What do you think about that?
No, I think you're right. I think perhaps there's a potential for athletes to get more skillful as they borrow on successes and build on what's happened before them. But perhaps there'll be more great outliers here. I just, like I said, I think we'll probably be dealing with generally a smaller pool of athletes.
Yeah, well, I think that the youth, if you look at the numbers, the youth have become less physically fit, less physically able. So as soon as we, if when I look out my window, if the kids aren't all outside playing street football or tag or baseball, they're not doing those things, then they are limiting their ceiling right off the bat. So
Right.
that I agree with. But um, so maybe it's the pool that we're drawing from will diminish, and maybe we'll see the effects of that, in certain places later. It's an interesting question.
You mentioned you mentioned Bud earlier. Let's get another couple of the mega fights out of the way from last week before we're going. Mr.
Were there
Jake
mega
Paul.
fights last week?
Yeah, man. Jake Paul, AJ,
Okay.
greatest prize fighter in history, perhaps. I say that without jest. If we
Who age
if we talk
you
no,
AJ is the
Jake
greatest
Paul,
prize fighter? Oh,
Jake Paul. If we talk about the prize,
right.
emphasis on the prize, one of the greatest prize fighters in history. Don't love it.
Yeah. I
Can't hate it.
think he obviously bit off more than he could chew with this one. And I
He ain't
really
chewing much this week.
no. I mean and I think he may be done. He may be done. And I think the positives is that he brought a lot of eyes to boxing. Like I was able like my kids, my fighters, they're not boxing fans, right? But they were talking about the Jake Paul fights, and that led us into some talks about fights and getting them to watch some old fights and some old fighters and stuff. Um, so maybe he deserves credit for that. Um, and I would have liked to have seen him see if he can make a run at the cruiserweight title, right? Cruiserweight is such a weak division in boxing. I know you don't really follow boxing, but there are no cruiserweight Americans. It's just a weight class. It's just sort of
What's that
if you're
like?
big enough.
190, 192,
Yeah.
200,
No,
something
what?
like that?
Yeah. I think at 190 is like the cap. So if you're big enough, you fight heavyweight. You bulk up and you fight heavyweight. Even there are a couple British fighters like of the last like 10 or 15 years who were like really good cruiserweights and just bulked up. It would have been interesting to see if someone could start that late and with all the resources in the world could make a run at a cruiserweight title. But fighting AJ was too much.
Right. Oh yeah, of
With
course. I think I don't know much about the kid, right? But he's clearly worked hard. He's able to get to himself just the fucking whether it's fixed or it's been dragged out or whatever. The huevos to just get in the ring with some of the guys he's got in the ring with.
yeah,
Kudos. This would be he's where most amateurs would typically be now, and they would fold under the little bit of pressure down at the local community center. So good for him.
I and I think it's a little sad for AJ, if I'm being honest, because I think there was a point, and you let me know. I mean, I think there was a point where people saw him as the next great sort of English heavyweight before Fury, or maybe there was somebody who was just waiting to have Fury versus AJ at Wembley Stadium or something and print money, and then AJ just sort of lost to a nobody, and then he just got killed by Usyk two times. And then he lost to another nobody when they were trying to build, I don't know if you know, they were trying to build a fight between him and Wilder. Wilder couldn't beat Fury, but he was still marketable, especially in America. And so they both fought on the same card, and Wilder beat his man, and AJ lost to, this mid-level fighter, got knocked out again. And so now he's in the circus. Now I heard they're trying to make a fight between him and Fury. Um, I guess people will still pay for that, but I'm not going to pay for that.
Yeah. All right.
So hey, I went down this rabbit hole last night because we were talking, and I went
Which
on
one?
Instagram. I went on Instagram and I put in hashtag footwork,
Okay.
and then
So
I just
you went to
started.
sleep angry.
I just started scrolling, and well, I was like, first off, we I can't believe how the ladder is just everywhere. The stupid fucking ladder has become such a part of quote unquote footwork training. But I saw some other things. I saw some guys putting like the broomsticks between guys' legs to move them. I saw so many cones and hurdles and it wasn't just MMA that was feeding me, but it fed me a lot of boxing and a lot of other stuff. How do we how do we talk to those people? What do we say to those people? How do we help them?
I don't know. I thought you were going to steel man it, so I thought you'd have more ideas because
No,
I don't.
I have a steel man because I think I know your position. So what is your position on footwork?
My position on footwork is that footwork is your feet organizing to keep you stable in an upright posture and base to be able to produce and receive force. Okay, to produce a stable base. I think that's information driven, meaning in the sense that you're picking up from your engagement with your opponent, where they are in space, what you're trying to do, your ins, your outs, whatever. I think it can only be done with a live opponent to emerge effectively. So, and I think it can be done very, very effectively without getting hit in the head and just keeping this liveliness in here. And my foundations practice is largely a footwork and distance management program. Yes, we do some kicks, we do some shoulder hits, some chest hits and whatnot. We do some different tactics and strategies. That's primarily what it's for. I'm looking for that to footwork to kind of stabilize over time. Been doing it for about 5, 6 years now. I can't, there's certain things in footwork they talk about the rhythm step and the L step and switching stances and everything. I don't see a lot of these classic resets appear in my students. They seem to build this fluid, stable footwork pretty quickly because they're constantly in the dynamic with the training partner and different training partners. But it takes a while to stabilize. First, it's kind of clunky, and then they might be good at moving forward and maybe a bit better moving back. But over time, it just really settles down and stabilizes, and it starts to take on that kind of fluidity, that kind of that nice looseness, and yeah. So, and the whole time they're never thinking about the feet. As much as I'll give them a couple of things that will dial in on footwork, will be, of course, maybe drawing attention on pivots on the kicks, going goofy, which is lefty versus righty, and we'll talk about getting off the train tracks and whatnot, just creating these subtle shifts and angles. That's about as much instruction or emphasis or you know details I'll give to footwork. I just let the rest emerge. So that was kind of a long ramble there, but that's how I develop footwork, and that's my opinions on it. I don't think it can be done effectively without a live opponent.
Okay, so we could almost define footwork as a relationship between the two people.
Yes,
Okay.
I would absolutely define it as that. It's relational. So
So,
your position in space and your partner's position in space, which is constantly and dynamically shifting.
all right. So here, let me push back on a couple things then.
Sure.
Do you find, and because you sort of started this conversation talking about youngsters and their ceilings on skill, because one of the things we don't see is kids outside moving around, playing tag, and building up this movement library, for lack of a better term. So, as an example, I agree that if I was going to coach youth soccer, the first thing we do is play a bunch of tags because you see all of the starting and stopping and maybe things we call agility, but I don't want to worry about words. We see starting and stopping and changing direction and all the direction of movement. And we see that emerge naturally. And then so I guess my question is when you get a kid come into your room who has done something else that involved a lot of movements or footwork in their sport, aren't they already sort of ahead of? So,
Yes, and anecdotally, this is purely
okay.
anecdotal. I found, especially from kicking and footwork more generally, I've seen soccer players, ex-soccer players, pick up that kind of footwork and movement and kicking a bit more rapidly. That's anecdotal, but that
Okay.
I'm rarely surprised when someone seems to be, Jesus, your footwork's starting to look beautiful really early, and you're really turning your kicks over and stuff. Often they've got a soccer background.
Well, it makes sense that kicking, but I've also seen some similar things with basketball players, with tennis players, with certain football players, certain positions. When we were working with some linemen at for a football team that I won't name, but the best football team in the country. Um, when we were playing some shoulder and tag games and stuff, they moved way better than in my normal beginners. Right now, I think we could argue that all of that movement is developed in some type of relational manner. So maybe that's why it crosses over. Um, is there a place to teach? I don't want to say patterns, but could we argue that in fighting, there are certain patterns that emerge or steps that emerge or movements that emerge? They'll see them in the UFC, like shifting, as an example, right? Where you punch and step forward, or you switch your feet in place, or anything like that. Is there a value in showing them those things?
I don't know. So here's what I'm saying. I think there's three expressions of footwork you'll see coming out, say in the UFC, right? You've got
Okay.
the general kind of ringsmanship as they're moving around and they're not quite engaged yet. You can often tell if someone's kind of had that kind of deeply ingrained, so to speak, or maybe the shadow boxing, the pad work or whatever. Even sparring, right? So it looks clean. You can just tell, right? I see this a lot with and this is not to shit on female MMA at all. I kind of see this. They look kind of stable and robust and super technical as they're moving around. And then for these initial movements, maybe the darts and the step-ins or whatever, you can start to maybe see some of maybe what they've been training in isolation, perhaps glimpses of it. I think once the exchange starts, it all goes out the fucking window. So when I'm talking about footwork, and I'm talking about anything, we're talking about technique or movements or kicks or punches or whatever we're talking about. I'm really only interested in the engagement part of it. And I think it could be a bit of a red herring or a little bit misleading if the two fighters are not actually engaged or just jockeying around and moving per position. Then I think you might see this nice, neat and tidy footwork. But that's not really interesting to me. I'm interested in this where the rubber meets the road, or the skill, so to speak. Once the engagement starts to unfold, and this is where I think the kind of the rationale for what we talk about flips, because then everything goes out the fucking window. It's just fucking chaos, and it's just organization in real time. And I think more of that in training is what's producing that robust, effective footwork.
I'm going to push back on one thing though. I
Yeah,
think the engagement starts the second the bell rings, because they are at least trying to establish positions in the cage. They are trying to uh, create advantages even before the physical. Like you're saying the engagement, the striking, the offense, the defense, and I'm saying that there's still a lot of that, and maybe not the people you're talking about, but think about cutting off the cage. Think about taking the center. Think about everything that even happens before the actual engagement. I think that's I wouldn't short shift. I wouldn't ignore that. Now, what you're saying about all that fancy movement and all that stuff that goes out the window, I think maybe that's a different thing. But I think there is a strategy and tactic to positioning and things that does occur before, and it's still built the same way. It still has to be done with a partner. So I'm not pushing back on how that's trained. I'm just
no, I agree with you, but I think, as I said, I'm interested in where so you can see all the stable movement as they're moving around or pushing into the center or circling around off the cage and whatnot. Sure, but again, it's not that you can say, okay, the engagement started. I'm talking about, which keep coming back to, that fighting's this battle for stability and instability and maintaining and regaining stability. I think that's what good footwork is. Is
I
the other
agree.
stuff's the other stuff's yeah, that's nice. That's icing on the cake. You can move around, you get yourself from here to there and whatnot. What footwork is for me is being able to, organize your base of support as these exchanges are unfolding, as you're being destabilized. That's really what good footwork is. Sure, we can move around and look pretty, but as soon as someone's punching and kicking us and then that exchange starts to unfold, are you able to are you able to establish a robust and effective base then? That for me is what footwork is.
And that has to have a person.
I think so. Because
I
that's what we
agree.
want to that's what we want to get good at. Not even being not it's not being stable, it's maintaining and regaining stability. If I can say that without trying to nerd out too much. And again,
No, I agree.
stability is just or if you use the word perturbation, just getting shoved and bumped around and reacting to kicks and punches while you're trying to throw kicks and punches. Okay, this is all creating noise, and you're trying to remain stable through that with good footwork posture. It all comes from the ground. So I think that's what I'm interested in. How you look when the engagement hasn't begun yet, or like the exchange hasn't begun yet. I'm not particularly interested in, because you'll see the top level fighters all the time. They'll plod forward, they'll bring their feet together, whatever, to get to the engagement. So I think it's two different things.
All right. So I think when I'm talking about, I think the engagement is whenever we are that can be hit or can hit.
Sure.
Okay.
It's kind of
So
that middle ground, right? It's
yeah,
still
we're
that
talking
kind of
about
middle
this.
ground.
Yeah, we are talking about the same thing, right? When we,
Stable,
yeah,
becoming unstable, fucking chaos.
gotcha.
Did you like my finger puppet thing there?
Yeah, no, I think that's
Was that
perfect.
helpful?
That's a good illustration. Um,
So back to
is
the
there
ladder.
nothing?
Back to the ladders. Then I think again creating these stable movement patterns in and out and everything. Can it, would I say there's well I don't know that that would be disingenuous or of me to say that there's absolutely no transfer. But from what I understand about movement being information driven and the becoming skillful within that these dynamics, then I'm saying no, it's not really transferring. Or if it is, it's so minimal that we're kind of wasting our time. I'll keep coming back to this, Adam. We only have so much time.
Sure.
We're not saying this stuff's completely useless. Maybe we're suggesting it. We're saying let's take what's actually most likely giving us the best bang for our buck.
I I
Yeah,
obviously agree. I'm trying to be, yeah, no one would want to listen if we agree. Um, I still think there is a place to share some ideas, and I don't think you disagree. I'm not building your straw man. Um, to give some ideas to them on things that they could play with their feet. Maybe I don't play with is the right answer, right phrasing, but I'm not totally set on just like let them discover. And I don't think you are either. But I think there are like some cool little tricks and games and movements and things that I'm happy to share with some of them, not all of them, because it's not for all of them. Um, and then they just throw it right, not doing reps of it, not on the ladder, just and then go right back into the game. Like if you want to play with it, like, or they'll come to me and they'll be like, "Hey, I was watching so and so and they did this step. I don't, and I'm like, this step," and they'll be like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, go try it. Like, what do you want?" Like, there's no like, you're not gonna program it, you're not gonna rep it. Just give it a shot.
yeah. Actually, I had these two kids come in last night. One was a boxer and one was a wrestler. They're just coming in for a trial, and it was a bit of an open workshop last night. So they're playing around at the end, and they're trying this step over thing. And I saw what they were trying to do, and I said, I like what you're trying here, okay? I said, and I gave them a little cue, and I used the cue of picking up a quarter. I said, so whatever side you're stepping to, imagine you're with your other arm, you're just going to step down and pick up the quarter, right? And this might not make sense on video, especially when it blurred out. So as we're stepping off here, we're just stepping down and pick up this quarter. So it loads the hips and the shoulders enough, so the pivot's a little bit easier, right? Because if we just come out square, we're a little flat footed.
Sure.
So I can give these little cues and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I say, but then you need to practice this. And I was explaining to them, we're not going to hit each other in the head, but we're still going to be moving around. And he says it's going to take time. This is a really tough thing to get in, really, really tough thing to develop in live. We can do all the pivots and the fancy stuff, but again, show me live, show me doing it live under pressure. It's two different things. So
100%. So I think we're completely on board with that. I play some games where they have to stay connected. At a minimum, they're sort of their forearms are touching each other, but they can connect and disconnect any way they want to, grab and disconnect. But the goal is to try and, the tasks are to try and move around each other a little bit. Right. Because that type of footwork that they all want to use, they all saw Lomachenko and they're all like, I want to do this. And I'm like, well, it's a different sport. And but if you want to play with that, it's easier to start to develop that from contact. It starts to be harder to do that when you're in space. Everything's harder in space. And so yeah, so we'll play little games and I'll take out the hooks to the head and stuff. Let them they can hook to the shoulder, use to move each other, connect, disconnect, and then they can play with it. I agree. I was going to use an example from football, the real football, not soccer, um, where there are some like there are some footwork techniques taught very in a very similar idea to what you're saying to help the players learn how to drop their weight and change direction because that's not always self-evident. Um, Now in football, they practice that. They do a little too much of that on air. When I think obviously you can only develop that. It never made sense to me at a football practice why you would do anything on air when the position you're playing against is also there. But there are some steps that are taught to help the players sort of learn, and I guess maybe that's all I'm saying in MMA or striking. Maybe there's some ideas like sinking your weight or doing some things like that that we share, but then it has to immediately go right back into the a live training.
sure. And I think these styles of footwork that seem to appear, and I'll concede, okay, that if we sit down on our punches and take all that ground reaction force and drive off the floor and everything. We're going to create more power. But again, this is all very much dependent on the rest of the body and what's actually and the style of the fight itself. Some fighters are a bit more mobile. It's a trade-off, right? If you want to triple G it and plod across the ring and be stuck to the fucking ground every time you hit, you're going to knock motherfuckers out. But if you're going to be a bit more fleeting and elusive and on your toes and whatnot, you're going to maybe trade off a little bit of power for movement and evasion. I think the skill's being able to work within that meta-stable region, if you will, to be able to, wherever your attention's going, to be fast, to be fleeting, to be powerful, to finish a combination or a blitz or whatever. These all demand different kind of footwork behaviors and patterns, and I think you practice them all. You practice them all through sparring games.
I agree. And I think more than just that, I think one of the things that I am there in the room for is to make sure that they understand the pros and cons of going down or focusing on certain things. So if you've never wrestled before, then sitting down and throwing everything, with force is a good way to get taken down. They now that will happen to them, but as someone with experience who's seen these things, or you'll fatigue faster, or et cetera, et cetera. So as the coach, part of my job, I think, is to share with them some things that, given enough time, I think they'd figure out on their own. But that's where my experience comes in handy. If you have no pop, then maybe certain things are not for you. Maybe certain, and we talked about this once before. It's like female bantamweight fighters do not knock each other out. They win fights by decision. They win fights by submission. So how much hand pad work of sitting down and throwing hard is valuable for those for women?
Right. I think it's always dependent on the stylistic context of the fight and what's happening in that moment. I mean, look all the different sports. What is footwork? Taekwondo, karate, Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, MMA. What is the proper footwork for MMA? We can see these tendencies because we believe that the rules are the fundamentals of the game from which the behavior emerges. But we can see these tendencies across sports and the similarities in the footwork that's interesting actually. While I'm talking about the different styles, did you see the Luke versus Nico Muay Thai fight in one? I fuck
I
up the
did
last name.
not.
So
I don't. Not a big, not a big fan of
it's the
that
young.
sport.
It's so Luke the chef
Oh,
versus
so
Nico Carrillo, Scotsman.
just for a second, like he came and did a seminar at my buddy's gym.
Luke did.
Yes,
I think he's.
SBG.
I think he's a beautiful to watch mover. It's highly creative. I want to talk a little bit about that fight because
Yeah,
I think it's
we'll
beautiful,
come
but
back to.
stylistically that was really interesting. Go ahead.
All right, so hold that for a sec. We'll definitely come back to that. He did a seminar, and I saw some of the footage, and I spoke to some of my guys there, and I've seen him online doing some coaching and stuff. He is very similar in idea or conceptually to me as, like, we were talking about Jeff Chen last week. What he does is what he does. It's what he's developed. Yeah, I'm sure he's sparred thousands of the chef. I'm sure he's sparred thousands of rounds. He's fought a ton of high level fights. Those things that he does are because, first off, he's built in a specific way. He moves in a specific way. He's built all that. And I just, when my friend asked if I was coming to the seminar, I was like, why? Like, and I'm not saying this to be, there is nothing technically or movement wise that he can teach me. And I'm not saying that arrogantly because I don't know anything about Muay Thai. But I am not going to go there, see he's going to teach these patterns or these combos or these fakes, these reads, these things he does, and I'm going to do what with that? I'm going to write them in a notebook and go home and teach my guys? It just doesn't make sense. Like you can't transfer information that was built on your platform with blood, sweat, and tears.
Well, you keep coming back to this, and you spoke about only Jeff Chan could be Jeff Chan. So, flesh it out a little.
sh- I don't know how big Luke is, but he looks like he is all limbs. He is all long and lean, and probably is he long for his weight class?
Yeah, I think he's pretty long. Certainly taller than Nico here. I just pulled up the fight.
So he is moving and acting and perceiving in an authentic way for him. And so if he does a seminar with 100 people, there might be one person there who has the same physical constraints, the same action capacities that Luke has. So he may be able to mimic some of that until it becomes his own thing. But for 99% of the people there, trying to mimic him is going down a the wrong path.
Right.
So
No,
tell me about this fight.
no, I just thought stylistically, because a lot he had this very pleasing kind of style and the fluidity and the creativity, beautiful. And I think he was doing really well early on. But Nico was just fucking plodding forward, eating what Luke was throwing, and he broke him down with power. Just feet stuck to the floor, and hard crackbacks, and that real kind of almost like that kind of Rod Tang style came in. So stylistically, I thought it was really interesting. Luke eventually got finished, but the first couple of minutes of the fight, he was looking good. He was looking untouchable. He was popping. He was clipping. He was, straight teeps to the face and stuff. So I enjoyed the fight. Stylistically, it was very apparent. It was very, 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 very different. And I don't know if they fight again, whether Luke can win that fight, actually. I think it was quite clear he couldn't really do much to Nico in the power department. But I don't know. But I enjoyed
Well, if
it.
you
So
can't,
bravo to them
if
both.
you can't, if you don't have a tool to stop someone coming forward, then you're on your back foot the whole time, and that is exhausting. And so
And that's what
when,
happened because I think he was doing a really good job of it early on.
yeah,
In
and
and
so
out, sticking and moving.
some of my young fighters who want to be more mobile, they want to emulate, O'Malley or guys like that. You know, I let them know that they still are going to have to be able to stop someone from coming forward. They're still going to have to be able to sit down sometimes because running around on your back foot is exhausting. And you see it start to fade over the course of even 3 round fights, but certainly over 5 round fights. And so that's the again what we have to help them sort of see bigger picture sometimes, right? Um,
I think the
the
glove
what
size also changes the tactics and the strategies here. When you
so
have someone as powerful as Nico, he was just blasting right through that guard.
that's what I was going to ask you. Again, I'm not a real, I don't know a lot about Thai boxing, but I have read that there's been a lot of criticism of the small glove one style Thai boxing because it's a different sport, right? Because the small gloves, like from what I understand, traditional Thai boxing, it's not very punch heavy.
Right.
Over the course of the 5 rounds, they actually start, there's almost a set pattern of what the rounds look like in a traditional Thai fight. They go from like almost a warm-up round to some striking to more like the fourth and fifth round are mostly fought in a clinch. So now you've called this Thai boxing, but it's being fought differently because of the small gloves, because of the rule set. Is it even Thai boxing anymore?
Right.
Or is it when Rory fought MMA in South Africa many years ago? It was like the first event. Rory, Forrest, John Kavanaugh, they were all on the same card. And at the beginning they didn't have a lot of MMA fighters in South Africa. They had a lot of strikers in South Africa. So the first few fights on the card, they called extreme stand-up. I think that's what it was called, extreme stand-up. And it was exactly these one fights, small gloves, no takedowns. Every fight was over in like a minute and a half. They were all just brutal KOs. So I wonder, are these one fights, are they extreme stand-up? They're not Thai boxing anymore, are they?
Well, again, no, not maybe in the traditional sense. I really enjoy it. I think one put on. I'm not sure how they treat the fighters, so I'm not going to say about them like politically, but I do like the intensity and the excitement of the fights over there. They seem to have a
I
little bit more free leeway with the rule sets and being creative for the rule sets. I mean, when Mighty Mouse fought Rod Tang and the hybrid fights and stuff, I think that could go a long way. Bringing people to sport too. I'd like to see more creativity.
Sure. I mean, it sounds fun. I would have loved to have seen Roger Gracie and Gordon Ryan do a gi match and a no gi match. Flip a coin, which one is first? do one, take an hour, do the next one. I think stuff like that is fun. I'm very surprised the UFC has not incorporated some other things, but I guess there are enough MMA fighters and stuff. So, and that's sort of one's thing. But um, yeah, I enjoy that. But the question is, we talk about context, we talk about representative design and those things. Once you even something as subtle as changing from the big gloves to the small gloves, that requires a change in how you train and approach. And so, is it calling it MMA? Is that really what it is? I mean, not, I'm sorry, calling it Muay Thai, is that really what it is anymore?
Yeah, just a label, right? I mean, again,
Right.
you change the rules even subtly, and this is, from our perspective of complexity and whatnot. Not so much the rules, the demands, the context, the intentionality shifts throughout the fight. So again, we can say, everything is purely unique, and that's that's where ideas are coming from. That you mentioned in the earlier podcast, do we acknowledge them or do we just accept them? I think we have to accept this and both acknowledge it. That we just need to appreciate that the fight's always changing. Fights are different, subtle rule sets are different, the round times are different. I know this seems really obvious, but this just maps on well to we need to kind of be pushing our athletes to get as much as the experience in all these kind of different rule sets, and we can play around with them in the gym, and that just maps on nicely to constraints, the knobs and the dials.
No, 100%. I mean, if you, I was listening to some sportscasters yesterday, were talking about basketball, and the one of the guys said that something that has been proposed was to expand the court because all of a sudden every player is like 6'8" or bigger. There's just no room to move on the court anymore. And so once you expand the court, all of a sudden it becomes a different game.
Right.
If you made the football field wider, not soccer, football, if you made it wider, the size of the players would shrink because they would have to be able to move laterally faster, and huge athletes have a harder time moving laterally fast.
Right.
And so it's something my coach Matt always pushed was this idea that your jujitsu in a gi should not change when you take off the gi, should not change when there are strikes involved, should not change on the street. And I understand conceptually what he's saying because grappling is grappling, right? Controlling another body at its core is controlling another body. But to me, contextually, all those things are different. And so if you wanted to be the best at no gi grappling, is it valuable to grapple in a gi? And so if you want to be the best Thai boxer in the world, is it valuable to put on these ridiculously small gloves and fight in a cage? Because if you don't spend time in those small gloves fighting in a cage, you are unprepared. What do you think?
You're certainly unprepared when you go and fight with small gloves. Um, yeah, I mean, I think again, going back, I don't want to be redundant here, but I keep going back to a lot of the same points. I think in our rooms, the variability is doing most of the heavy lifting. The variability,
Yes, but the variability is still within a rules set,
sure, sure, yeah.
right? And so, yeah,
But
we have some
to add to
sparring.
your point, I see different.
Oh,
It's subtle,
please.
but I see different behaviors going on when my guys have got small gloves or big gloves, and I don't care what gloves they're using
Yes,
for striking. And some often there'll be boxing gloves, 16 ounces against well, we use 6 ounce training gloves. It changes the
same.
behavior.
Of course, yeah. Um, I agree. It changed the behavior on both sides because I know that sometimes when they put on small gloves, they almost don't want to hit each other. And so it changes that. When they have big gloves on, they're more willing to hit each other. There is a distance difference.
Right.
Even though a boxing glove it's this much difference, it changes things. So I agree, and I don't care what they wear. And what I found in my room, just what has occurred naturally is when no one has fights lined up, everyone is usually in big gloves. Not from my MMA practice, but my Saturday morning sparring session. They're more in big gloves. And as guys start to sign fights, they'll start to put on the small gloves. and then their partners will start to put on the small gloves. Um, but but imagine what would happen if we only trained in big gloves and then they put on small gloves to fight. They would have to recalibrate everything, and I don't know if they'd have time to do it.
Right, and I wish I don't have it in front of me, so I want to be careful what I say about it because I might have it flipped. But if I remember correctly, I think it was a Robert Ostrovsky paper. He was looking at the range between, or there was some kind of paper that looked at the range. They measured the range between fighters when they sparred, and they measured the range between fighters when they were fighting, and it was
Right.
different.
Yes.
Now I might have this arse over elbow, but I believe they're a little bit further away when they're sparring. And this, for me,
Yes.
probably is just about the intentionality of trying to actually get in there and hurt someone and bite down and get in there. So it's different. It's different. And the plausible way of getting used to that tightness and closer space would be to try and hit each other hard in the gym. So again, I get all that.
Right.
I get the rationale for hard sparring. I'll never not get the rationale for it,
We both do.
but I have to find other creative ways. And you said something yesterday. You disagreed with me yesterday on the. I think I made a comment on who was the coach who was talking about Izzy, and he was showing Izzy and Volk and the number of feints, the ratio of feints, and I
No,
said data was meaningless.
right. I
Not saying
agree
it's not
with you.
interesting, but it says it's meaningless.
And I think it's more meaningless from the fact that it then becomes a thing.
Do you want to
So
describe what the post was?
okay, right. And so I think it was from a seminar at Bang Tao, um, which is a gym run by the Hickman brothers, who are from Georgia. We have some connection with them. Really nice guys. They were at Tiger, and then they opened up their own thing. And I think that's where Volkanovski spends a bunch of his time. They bring in a lot of coaches to do seminars, and they brought in Izzy, and is Braverman his coach? Is that his name?
I think so.
I don't want to say the wrong name. And part of the seminar, they were doing this drill where Braverman said that if you look at the best strikers, they will fake or feint 7 times for every one real strike. I'm not sure where he gets that number from. Someone else made a Instagram reel where they counted up, a couple of his fighters, and it was 2 clips. So way to cherry pick, you know, uh, a fight that has 100 engagements. He cherry picked 2 and counted to 7. And then Braverman said even the better the striker, the more fakes and feints to uh, real strikes. I've watched enough striking and boxing to know that that seems it doesn't seem right. And I think what becomes dangerous is that people will now watch those clips and try and force their guys to throw. They'll tell their students, you have to throw 7 fakes between each strike. And now you're like, why? If my guy can go out there and throw a double jab cross and land it, they don't need to probably fake or feint shit. They can probably just keep doing that. And then they can do 1 fake and land the 2. And then they can go to the body and then land. Like, point being, if you think it's this measure or this metric, then you try and force that.
Right. So when I said it was meaningless, I think it's interesting, and I think he's probably right. I think as you come up to the elite level and elite level fighting, now put a pin in that elite level fighting, you're going to see more feinting ratios. The ratio of feints are going to be higher.
Okay,
From my
sure.
perspective, I think what's going on. So we think perception and action are purely coupled, right? That we perceive to act, we act to perceive. So they're probing, they're trying to create these opportunities. And when you're
Okay,
trying to create opportunities at the highest level, which are very, very fleeting and very, very dangerous, and the temporal aspect of when you can actually land that strike is very, very small. It's going to take more exploration, in my opinion. And I
sure.
think that's what we're seeing. So I think to say that elite fighters are doing that, I think that's an emergent quality of elite level fighting. That I'm not going to be able to just come in and wallop you whenever I want. I'm going to have to explore and tease out and whatnot. So I think what he's saying is it could be correct. I'll take it. I'll concede that it's 7-1 for elite, five to
No,
one
see,
for good.
I will not concede that. I think that is the mistake he's making,
I'm not
right?
going.
So,
Yeah, okay. What I'm saying, I could concede that. What I'm saying that what I
okay,
mean that's it's whether it's 7 or whether it's 4-8 or whether it's 10 or whatever the fuck the number is.
exactly.
I'm saying okay, cool, that's interesting, maybe. But I think the reason that we're seeing that is because of the reality of the exchange itself. The opportunities and the pickup and exploitation of affordances or opportunities are much narrower and much tighter and much fleeting. So therefore, we're
Yes.
going to see more explorative prodding, probing, feinting, teasing, we're going to see more of that behavior because that's what the task demands.
Of course, you have to be deceptive, and you said it before. Every time you throw something, you are in danger. It is an important lesson that I want my fighters to realize that they should expect something to come back every time they throw. If it doesn't, good for them, but something's coming back, and it's coming back chaotically, right? It's not you throw a jab cross and then you just slip. No, you throw something and that guy is just fucking swinging back at you. Some of the biggest knockouts in MMA history are a guy basically closing his eyes, taking a shot, and just throwing something back. So being deceptive is also is a probe. It's a perceptual activity. It's whatever you want to call it. No, there is no argument that deceptive actions need to occur as part of your striking, whether those are fakes or feints or footwork or level changes, whatever they are. But to create some artificial ratio, when I guarantee that that number is total bullshit. Because if it's 7 on average, that means every time they do 2, whatever the fucking math is, that means what? And you know what? And I'll go one step further. And you see, now you forced me. Now I'm going to get killed because Braverman has all these champions and he's a great kickboxing coach. All respect to him and his team. They are really good strikers. Are you going to force people to do that? And you know what? If you look at Izzy's later fights in his career, his fakes and feints and all that stuff took the place of actually throwing any real offense. He's just standing around fucking faking and feinting and moving, and everyone's like, oh, it's beautiful. And maybe it's 7 or 8 or 12 or 15. But you know what he's not doing? He's not striking and attacking. He's not getting into exchanges. He's just so passive. So don't you think well-used deceptions and things, the purpose of that is to land something, not to be the most deceptive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But the cue is for me. So in fights, I don't. Sometimes I do. I mean, I'm get as emotional as anyone. But when I'm cornering, we say make them bite a lot, right? Just make them
Sure.
bite. It's just a reminder to instead of from kind of when we've seen them being a little bit too static, and every time they see an opening, they're trying to shoot it right away. We remind them, keep them biting. Level change, little feints, little fakes. I think the danger of bringing in a number. This is the fucking last thing I want to do. Try and pay attention at every sixth or seventh
Right,
in 5 or 6
exactly.
times. That's robbing that's directing their attention to somewhere that's completely unhelpful. So again, great coach, right? Very, very
Sure.
dedicated, got all the people, got all the medals, got the scoreboard or whatnot. But
Scoreboard.
people listen to this,
Yes.
and there's probably countless gyms working on this 6 or 7 to 1 ratio in the next few weeks. And I'm not sure that's helpful.
100%. I agree 100%. My friend Chris Connolly says he calls those things tricks. He says trick them. That's his cue to his guys. Trick them. Get them to bite on something. Trick them. I always like that cue. Um, yes, and it's funny because in this clip they take it live or sort of live. But when you watch them doing this live drill, it's one guy waiting around for the other person to finish 5 to 9 fucking whatever movements and then throw a strike and the other nothing lands. Like if you were legitimately using fakes and feints and tricks and deceptions, things will be landing. And so it is very hard. You can do it as an offense defense drill, I guess, but it's hard to do that. And so what you call in a live drill is it's not really a live then.
Right.
It's one guy waiting around watching the other guy dance.
So let's round off here with the footwork. I'm going to get and so I don't think you need to teach footwork explicitly. That means I don't think you need to tell someone how to move the feet, where to move the feet, and when to move the feet. I think that is wholly can be you can do it that way, but it's wholly that will emerge very, very effectively through the appropriately scaled sparring games. So when someone comes into my class for the first day, I don't tell them how to stand at all. I may just to create a little conversation or break ice. I might ask them a little bit, are you right-handed, left-handed? I might suggest that they stand this way. I don't care. They naturally get into a bladed stance. Whether they're mimicking other people and thinking, how the fuck do I stand here or whatever, they're naturally getting in this bladed stance. But I want to get them away, completely away from thinking about where their feet are and completely engage with who's in front of them in that kind of range that's constantly dynamically changing. That alone, these little shoulder tag games and maybe then we'll start adding like low kicks and whatnot. And then now you've got to move back and forward while your weight's distributed so you can do a low check and stuff. This takes time, but it can be done extremely effectively without any prescriptive instruction or on the feet because I don't want them paying attention to what's going on in front of them. Your thoughts, how do you develop footwork? Or how would you add to that if you wanted to get a bit more fancy and nuance and do the fluffy stuff?
No, I don't want to do the fluffy stuff, but I am not against, and there's it's not a lot of it, yeah, but I'm not against like if I see one of my guys exploring shifting or exploring darts or exploring switch steps. And here's the thing for a second, which we always go back to. We can't ask a heavyweight to be Dominic Cruz, right? And so the idea that you would take the whole room and teach them any specific patterns or movements and stuff is silly to me. It doesn't make sense. But on an individual basis, I'm not against sharing. I'll give you an example. I had a fighter last night who was having a hard time. He has this tendency when he moves backwards to raise up because he's a little taller than most guys and he wants to land this. So if the person in front of him stays on his front foot and is just throwing straight down the pipe, he gets hit too much for my liking. And it happened in his last fight. So we would love for him to say to himself, when I do this, I get hit in the chin. Let me explore some other things. But at the same time, I, as the coach, want to help. So my job may be to make a suggestion on what he could do with his feet or his base or his posture or his structure to explore. I don't think you see anything wrong with that.
No, I don't. I think what you're describing is this is a stage, a general stage that I see across most of the fighters, right? And what I think's going on, and I must get his fucking name right, but the Italian sports guy, the Muay
Yeah,
Thai guy,
right.
uh, Dr. Giuseppe. So he has an interesting bit, and I will post it's Muay Thai 2.0. I've said I've done that already, but it's a really interesting presentation he does, and he's talking about how the body's actually doing a few different things. He's talking about the lower half of the body is purely organizing to stay stable, to provide the basic
Right.
support. The upper body and the trunk are creating the rotational forces, and the hand itself is working on the accuracy, right? So he says the body is organized in real times, but it's all doing different parts to create the behavior. I think what's happening, and because what you describe, I see all the time, and I might have tried to fix it or have my fingerprints all over it before, but I now see it as a necessary part. I think what's going on is when you see the head come up, I think they're at that particular stage, they're moving back quicker than their hips and their feet have caught up with it. So it takes some time. So this kind of hip extension that you get and the head comes up and whatnot, they're just moving. And so I'll talk to them. Let's try and take our hips with us, right?
Right. Same thing. Yeah.
Similarly with falling forward into your shots, they've not
Yeah.
quite developed it. So I don't think it's necessarily a faux pas or yeah, it's not ideal, but I think from watching footwork emerge organically, I think it's just a stage. And I think it's a
Right. And
necessary stage. I don't
I
know if I
think it's a
can
necessary
speed it up. I
stage.
think it's just this is you're getting there, and it's an idea to me that you're picking up on the opportunities and the information either to fade back or move forward, but your feet haven't quite caught up with what the rest of your body's doing. But I'm okay with that because I know if we just spend some more time here, that's all going to settle down. And that's a leap of faith I'm making.
Maybe though. Okay. So I'm going to push back on maybe because I think maybe we give failure is the best teacher. And it makes complete sense in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu where we are going 100% live. In striking, I think that our fighters can sometimes delude themselves because they are not getting banged. So I think sometimes we have to step in a little bit. And I'm not saying you step in and say, do this, but I'll go over and say, why do you think they are able to reach your chin here? Or people move, I'll say, hey guys, the person moving forward can move faster than you can move backwards. So explore. Like I'll create some drills, I'll force them to explore, but sometimes I think it is valuable, not early, but if there's a stage where it's valuable to jump in because I don't want this kid to go into his next fight and make the same mistakes. And some of these fighters are hard headed, right? Athletes are hard headed, they're stubborn, and we are not allowing them to experience full failure in striking. So I'm okay with inserting myself a little bit more with striking than I am in anywhere else. And it's only because of that.
Yeah, I would just question. I think again, what's going on with striking is we can layer on all the instruction and the tidbits and the coaching cues and whatnot. Fine. I'm not saying they're useless, but I said there's a necessary. I've just been watching it for so long now. The stages of basic coordination to control to skillful expression all takes time. It takes some a lot longer than others, and I think I could have spraffed ad nauseum over the top of it all, or I could have just let it happen. I'm not sure. Me talking and doing all the the highfalutin coaching stuff and like look at what I know and I can help. I just don't know if that would have got them there any quicker.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not
I'm not
saying you're doing
making,
it. I'm just,
okay. I'm not making that claim. That is something that I don't believe in or prescribe to or have any. I agree with you 100%. And we know there are stages of learning that they have to go through. And I had to show my brother recently. My brother was getting very antsy watching our mid-level guys have their hands down. Like he just was like he wanted to force everyone to have their hands up, let's say, as an example. And I said, Rory, I want you to watch something. Watch what happens within a couple weeks of entering the next level class where they're sparring to the head, right? Because you're worried about them at this middle level where we're still not really going to the head. We're still not hitting each other. Watch how quickly they can change that once the threat is more intense, once the threat is more real. I said, just watch a couple of them. Don't worry about whether you can tell people to keep their hands up and their chin down all you want. They won't fucking do it. But after a few weeks of sparring, I want you to watch how quickly they will organize to the new information. And Rory, I go a step further. I think that now they are also able to do more things because they're not stuck here, right? If you stick them here from day one, they will have a hard time later playing. And I was right. Once they get into the level where the information becomes a little more threatening or a little more dangerous or whatever it is, they make the requisite necessary changes.
I agree with everything you said. I want to round off here because we're trying to stick to an hour. We did the feet. Let's next time we maybe visit the head movement, the perceptual side of head movement, because I see a lot of videos like that making the bold claim that you can do X and fix your head movement, never get hit again, blah 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 blah. So
I saw this guy selling a system, and it was like, I think it was a triangle. I don't know what the shape was. Maybe this was the shape of the triangle. And then there were lines across the triangle. And he was just standing in front of the camera, just moving his head on this triangle. And this is like the head movement system. And I'm like, what the fuck
all
are
right,
you doing?
let's get a stick up our ass about the head movement games next time.
Imagine, we should design whatever the analogous item is to the ladder. If we could design that, I've seen a couple of them, like people put the thing on the heavy bag, like, like it sticks out and people have to move around the heavy bag. Obviously there's that slip bag that people love to push, like Tyson used to do. But I think if we could figure out like a head ladder, we would make a shit ton of money.
Yeah. Well, I'll be broke and try and keep my integrity. Anyway, Adam
All
Singer.
right. That's
Till
it.
next time. Yep. We're keeping this
Yeah.
short.
All right. I like it.
Happy holidays.
It's my birthday tomorrow.
Oh, it is. You old
Yeah.
fuck. How old are you now?
Tomorrow I will be 53 years old.
53. All right. Well, happy
Merry
birthday,
Christmas.
older brother.
Merry Christmas.